Hello out there. This is going viral January 17th of 2024. And tonight we're going to start with Ken Aaron in LA and Alex Staropoulos in New York. And we'll see what we wind up talking about and see who else joins us. Okay, so I'm going to start this meeting with a video.
The U.S. Navy is still searching tonight for 2 Navy SEALs lost at sea during a mission to stop Iranian weapons from making it to Yemen. And we are just learning what their team found, missile parts bound for the Houthi rebels. And tonight, the Biden administration is reversing itself and is expected to redesignate the group a terrorist organization. And it comes on the same day that the U.S. military carried out a 3rd round of strikes on the Houthis. CBS's Charlie D'Agata has the latest now on this widening conflict.
The assault of Gaza continued today, but Israel's fight against Hamas has triggered a dramatic escalation in attacks across the region. Off the coast of Yemen, new video shows Iranian-backed Houthis in a song and dance with new recruits aboard the Galaxy Leader cargo ship. Seized back in November, now turned into part trophy, part floating amusement park off the coast of Yemen, and a propaganda tool used to make a mockery of the American-led threats. But following last week's U.S.-UK bombardment, those threats turned to action again. The U.S. military says fighter jets struck 4 anti-ship ballistic missiles preparing to launch from Houthi territory in Yemen. Barely 24 hours after an attack on a U.S.-operated cargo ship, a Greek-owned ship was struck today by a Houthi missile in the Red Sea. Near the coast of Somalia, the U.S. military released these new images: Iranian-supplied warheads and missile parts confiscated from this ship headed to Houthi militants in Yemen in an operation in which 2 Navy SEALs were lost at sea. At the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said this goes beyond a regional problem.
This is a global challenge. We're talking about a vital artery of global commerce, a critical maritime choke point that's being held hostage.
Despite U.S.-led attempts, the Houthis say they'll keep hitting that choke point as long as Israel keeps hitting Gaza. And there's no sign tonight of either of those battles coming to an end anytime soon.
The Israeli military has been withdrawing a significant amount of troops out of northern Gaza. But Nora, we went to that border today. We saw the Iron Dome in action, intercepting Hamas rockets, even as Israeli soldiers pulled back.
Really interesting, Charlie D'Agata. Thank you very much.
Hey everybody, Peter Zine here, coming to you from chilly Colorado. And the news we had in the last few days is that Houthi militants in Yemen are launching a combination of low-grade ballistic missiles and drones and commercial shipping in the Red Sea. And that's led the 10 major shipping companies of the world to basically suspend operations in that area and either tell their ships to wait at the openings to the Red Sea until the threat passes, or simply sail around the Red Sea completely, which means going all the way around Africa for the Asia-Europe run. Now, first, let's get the caveats out of the way. This is not a state making a determined effort to shut down shipping in the area. That is something that has happened before in the aftermath of the 1973 war between the Arab states and Israel. The Israelis found themselves occupying the eastern side of the Suez Canal, and so they did just that in order to destroy one of Egypt's main sources of foreign currency and force them to the negotiating table. That's not what it's at play here. We have basically a bunch of drug-addled militants, some of the world's least competent ones, operating from some of the world's least valuable land in Yemen, probably at the instigation of the Iranians, who are their primary supporter, because this is a little conflict that is a needle in the side of Saudi Arabia. Costs them very little to do it. They're using some of the same weapon systems that they're selling to the Russians, and it's plausible deniability. It just causes a lot of heartburn. So this is not a formal shutting down of trade. This is more of a heavy annoyance that has the opportunity to maybe get worse, but at the moment, the warheads in play here are, no more than a few pounds to a few dozen pounds each. Nothing that can take out a tanker, nothing that can take out a container ship. The reason everyone's so touchy about it is the way insurance law works on the seas is if you sail into a zone where someone is shooting at commercial shipping, your insurance policy is null and void. And so if anything happens, like you need a tow, you're on your own. Or God forbid that you actually get a leak either from the attack or from something else, you're on your own. So out of an abundance of caution, everyone's just avoiding the area altogether. Now, who gets affected by this? Three big things to keep an eye on. First of all, this is roughly 30% of all global containerized traffic. And the biggest single chunk of that is Chinese exports to the European Union. These routes now need to go around the bulk of the African continent, which, based on where this stuff is being sold to, increases the sailing distance by 1/3 to 2/3. And that means you need 1/3 to 2/3 more container ships to maintain the same flows. So we're going to see a lot of pinches in the supply chains for finished goods. These aren't intermediate products for the most part. These are finished goods coming from the Chinese, which is obviously going to hit their bottom line in an environment where consumption is basically seized up in China and all they have left are exports. It's also going to make it a little bit easier for the Europeans to put trade sanctions on the Chinese for product dumping, for example, in the EV space. The Europeans are always looking for protectionist methods to apply. And if the Chinese are proving unreliable in their deliveries, that'll make that case that much easier. The second thing is crude oil coming from the Persian Gulf, mostly Saudi crude, that is going then north through the Red Sea and Suez. There are a couple of bypass pipelines for Suez that go through Egypt as well, which go into the Mediterranean basin and, of course, Europe. In the aftermath of the Ukraine war, this route has gotten a lot more traffic because the Europeans are no longer taking Russian crude, so the Persian Gulf has stepped in. This is about 12% of global energy shipments. Now, if this proves to be any more than a momentary problem, what the Europeans are going to be forced to do, what the Saudis are going to be forced to do, is to do what happened the last time this was closed down in 1973. The supertanker was developed. The traditional oil tanker only carries about 500,000 barrels, whereas a supertanker can carry a little bit over 2 million. It takes a larger tanker to make the trip all the way around Africa economically viable. And of course, the Saudis know a few people who have super tankers. So expect to see larger and larger vessels plying this route, which is going to put pressure on anyone else who is trying to bring in crude from a longer distance, which brings us to the third problem and where we're probably going to see the most pain in the market, and that's Russian crude exports. Now, when the Ukraine war started, the Europeans basically stopped using Russian crude, and then they gobbled up all of the crude that was available within arm's reach. Some from the United States shale fields, some from North Africa, some from West Africa, and the rest from the Persian Gulf. That meant, because of a lack of infrastructure, Russian crude had to be exported through the same port points on the Black and the Baltic Sea, but it had to be then shipped through the Mediterranean, through Suez, through the Red Sea, across the Arabian Sea to India, Southeast Asia, and China. Well, That is barely an economically viable route now, which is one of the reasons why the Russians are typically selling their crude at a $20 to a $30 a barrel discount. But if Suez is closed, then they can no longer send these small tankers through it. And these small tankers don't have the reach to go all the way around Africa in addition to all the way around Asia. So you're looking at something like 1.5 to 2 million barrels a day of Russian crude that might finally actually be stranded if this isn't solved pretty quickly. Now, the Russians do have one thing going for them here. The insurance rules that I kind of laid out there are how insurance has been working since the 1980s. But since the Ukraine war has started and Western insurers have been bypassing Russian shits completely, you have some Russian players, some Indian players, and some Chinese players who have started to offer indemnification insurance. So we might get this really colorful situation where the real shipping companies stop using Suez and the Red Sea, but these shadow companies that have never had to pay out start using it, and then we get to find out what happens if an Iranian-backed militant force hits a Chinese, Indian, or Russian ship, and how it goes down there. So this is an interesting little story. This is not the panic in shipping that I'm anticipating, because there's no real sovereign behind it. No one's actually trying to break the shipping routes. But it does raise some interesting mixes of motivations that are probably going to shake out in the next week or two. So stay tuned. I know I'll be watching. Bye.
There you go. What do you think of that guy?
That's interesting. Well,
Rambled around on a lot of different things, but
yeah, I mean, I know about his claims about the. Yeah, I don't know enough about what's really, the claims about the effects on the Russians. I kind of discount just because of how great their economy is doing now. Again, they're growing over 3%. In fact, according to the IMF, Russia's one of the three countries in the world to see gains in real wages, which means the wages of the average Russian grew more than inflation. The other two countries is Mexico and China. So again, all this stuff about, oh, it's going to affect China, it's going to affect Russia. Maybe it'll have some effect, but the sanctions have been quite a benefit to Russia actually. And again, there's always what he doesn't talk about is like, yeah, the reshipping of Russian oil again that goes mostly by pipeline, I think, to through India and through China. So they're getting their Russian oil anyway. I mean, yeah, and then that's going to increase the cost to the U.S. to Europe mostly. So who's buying that? And of course, the U.S. still continues to buy Russian oil that gets shipped, through from the Russian Far East, from like Vladivostok to the U.S. So I would need to do a much deeper dive into whether he's, full of shit or not. Which again, I know enough about the world oil markets and all of that. And
well,
actually,
you have to explain that to me. I thought the U.S. has sanctions on Russia because they invaded the
no,
Ukraine.
yeah, and we still buy their oil.
But we
because we stopped buying oil from Venezuela, and we replaced that, which is the reason it's so dumb is we replaced the Venezuelan oil with Russian oil back in whatever, like 2017, well no 2015 I think, when we started sanctioning Venezuela. And yeah, I think we reduced our the amount of Russian oil that were I vaguely remember something about that, but again, that might not even be true, because again, we might be buying Indian oil that's essentially like they send oil to India, the Indians refine the oil, and then now it's magically Indian oil. So
but why are we buying oil from overseas when we used to be exporting oil? In other words, this country is
it's
the number one producer of oil.
Sometimes it's the kind of oil, like you need certain kinds of heavier crude for the reason we were buying from Venezuela is because we needed their heavier crude for diesel, to turn into diesel. Plus the Koch brothers, they had this big refinery down, I don't know, Louisiana or somewhere, Texas, that was geared to get to refine that dirtier Venezuelan crude. So basically, you needed equally, kind of dirty crude from Russia, and the Russians were the other game in town, essentially. Again, this is like almost 10 years ago, back when Obama started sanctioning Venezuela. So I mean, it's
Why did he wait a
it's
minute?
musical
Obama?
chairs.
Obama?
Yeah, Obama declared that Venezuela was a national security threat, which is of course ridiculous. Like Venezuela's gonna, but it was an attempt to overthrow the Venezuelan government under Chavez. But it's well, we've seen how that's worked out. Every U.S. attempt, direct and indirect, stupid invasions with mercenary armies trying to backing this idiot Juan Guaido, who we've kind of dropped since then as the real president, even though he's never elected president. Yeah, and kind of with the same logic we always have with sanctions, that it's gonna convince the people of the country to overthrow their government and install our stooge instead, but which has, well, I don't almost never worked. Yeah. So, but Kenny, actually, I had a clip I was telling you about, yeah, that I can play again from Judge Napolitano's show. He's a retired counterterrorism CIA officer. Again, very knowledgeable guy. He's yeah, and here he's talking about what's Biden is up to in this is from a day or two ago, so this is quite recent.
Why is Joe Biden bombing? Yeah,
that's where we start.
what, if anything? I already know the answer. That's why I'm smiling. What, if anything, are they accomplishing?
Oh, well, the Yemenis said, okay, we're going to shut down the Red Sea. They've effectively done that. Any ship that's going to Israel to or from, they vowed to attack and have been attacking them. In fact, they just attacked another one today. And so, yes, they're under international law. The Yemenis are interfering with, at least the West can legally argue, that the Yemenis interfering with the right of navigation. And so the United States is going to take measures to open it up. Well, dropping bombs on Yemen, the phrase, oh, we're going to bomb them into the Stone Age. How do you bomb someone in the Stone Age who's already living in the Stone Age? Okay, you're not going to be able to damage them. The United States has been bombing parts of Yemen. It goes back almost 9 years, and took effect. Well, the Houthis actually ended up winning the war that we were fighting. We were helping the Saudis fight against them. So they're accustomed to taking a beating. The United States can continue to launch bombing attacks, and the problem is the missiles, the rockets, the systems that are used to attack these ships, they're mobile. We're not talking one or two. We're really talking thousands. And so the Yemenis can get them out there and have them running around, and you're trying to find the right one to hit. So it's a futile effort on the part of the United States. And then what it is exposing is that the aircraft carrier with its two accompanying destroyers that are there, or the Marine, the Bataan, the amphibious ship, these destroyers have what are called vertical launch systems. And they've got they're like canisters that sit in the deck, shoot the missiles up. And usually for every incoming missile, you're going to fire 2 missiles at it. Well, they don't have an unlimited supply. So after they fire like 80 of their missiles, they have to then go back to a port to have that system reloaded, because they can't reload it at sea. We got rid of the ships that could do that 30, 40 years ago. And so what the United States is engaged in is a futile operation, because they're not going to be able, through military force, through dropping bombs, killing Yemenis, that will get Yemen to go, oh, we better stop this because the United States is going to attack us. They don't care. They literally do not care. They are convinced that they're on the right, that what is happening in Israel, what Israel's doing to the Palestinians, is a violation of international law. And so they're fighting on behalf of the Palestinians.
Isn't it a violation of international law for the United States to attack another member of the UN?
Well, yeah, not just that, but think about this, Judge. The use of military force overseas against terrorist targets was done under the authorization for the use of a UMF, right. An order that came out in 2001. I mean, I know the guy was involved with actually drafting that. So by 2002, that AUMF authority was used, and Congress blessed it. Said, okay, yeah, you're good. You can now go after those terrorists. Well, Yemen is not identified as a terrorist state. Actually, Donald Trump put them on the terrorist list, and then Joe Biden came in and took them off. So they're no longer can be covered by AUMF. So here is the United States, the president, carrying out military operations overseas without the consent of Congress. Now, people will say, well, under exigent circumstances, you have to do that. And this is where Biden's so stupid. Why do you want Congress to approve it and give you the green light? Because when things go in the toilet, if it goes sour, if there's an aircraft carrier that's sunk and we've got 4,000 dead sailors, if Congress approved it, it's not just Joe Biden and his team of idiots that caused this. He's got to say, hey, Congress told me to do it. So he doesn't even understand the concept of political cover. And ditto for these people like Lindsey Graham calling to attack Iran. Okay, if you want to attack Iran, go to Congress, get permission. Let's see how that works out. They don't want to do that. They want to attack Iran, start a war, and then force Congress to come along. And, you know, that's a recipe for political disaster in the United States.
Here's Admiral Kirby doing one of his Baghdad Bob routines, cut 5, Chris, on Face the Nation yesterday, defending these strikes on the Houthis.
Does the U.S. assess that these coalition strikes will deter the Houthis, or are you bracing for retaliation and an open-ended conflict?
I think it'd be Pollyannish for us to think that there could or may not be some sort of retaliatory strike by the Houthis. We're watching this very, very closely. We've taken the requisite necessary precautions in the region to make sure we're ready for that if that should occur. These strikes were meant to disrupt and degrade their ability to conduct these strikes. And so we think that we had good effect on that. We're still assessing the battle damage assessment of those strikes, but we think we had good effect. We'll see what happens. The Houthis have a choice to make here now, Margaret. And the right choice is to stop these reckless attacks. And no matter what they say, this is not about punishing Israel. I mean, one of the ships they took a shot at yesterday was Panamanian flagged, and it was taking Russian oil. It had nothing to do with Israel.
So it may be an open-ended conflict. We don't know if deterrence has been established.
Nobody wants a conflict with the Houthis. We're not looking for a conflict with Yemen here. We're trying to get these attacks to stop.
In 2018, then Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis drafted a top-secret plan called Project.
You know, he's a retired admiral. He should know especially that about which he speaks, and apparently he doesn't, Larry.
Yeah. Well, you know, the other element, there's a financial element here. Each one of those missiles, the defense missile, air defense missiles that those ships fire, they cost between $1 and $2 million a pop.
Wow.
And so it's not like the United States is sitting on this completely full warehouse where we've got just an overabundance. You know, the missiles are pouring out the sides. We got too many, so let's use them up. No, we can't. We can't even produce enough every year to sustain this kind of operation over, say, a 6-month period. So what's going to happen is the Yemenis, they're going to launch a $10,000 drone. They could maybe swarm a ship with 100 $10,000 drones. And then the United States is going to have to fire, if they're swarming us with 100, we're going to have to fire 200 missiles at the tune of, let's just go with $1 million a pop. Well, right there, $200 million. $250 million.
So Kirby,
you sustain that.
Kirby claims we're degrading the Houthis. We're degrading ourselves.
Absolutely. That's
what's going on. In a PR way and in a military way, we're degrading ourselves.
Well, and one of the other things that's happened is one of the reasons they returned the ships, that original, I think it was the Gerald R. Ford that was there, they ordered it back to port, is because the crew it's undermanned, understaffed. So they can't really do everything that they need to do at sea and sustain themselves out there. So, you know, this notion that the United States is the greatest superpower in the world and that we're invincible. boy, we got some feet of clay. And what's dangerous is when our political leaders refuse to acknowledge that. And they maintain this pretense that all we got to do is just launch some bombing strikes and some cruise missiles. Boy, that'll show these people. And it's not gonna stop Yemen. I mean, candidly, the only way that you would stop Yemen is it would require an actual invasion of the United States, a ground invasion of Yemen, and a full-scale war to destroy the military. And we'd be talking hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of casualties on the part of the United States, not just to mention what would happen to the Yemenis. And we can't do that. We don't have the financial resources to do it. We're already $34 trillion in debt.
Okay, so that's about that. So Ken, you have any response? I should mention again, as he said, the number of I think we make about 500 of those, surface to air missiles. He's talking about the standard, which the Navy uses on our destroyers and cruisers. So he's absolutely right that, we will run out really quickly if, and this is a big problem with, as Mike can tell you too, we've been arguing about this, with naval, one of the problems with naval warfare is, again, how quickly the ships will deplete, their arsenals, their magazines, again, that you can, and that a land-based power can just overwhelm you, because of course they're going to, they can, send out, 1,000, and you don't have 1,000 missiles to shoot them down, even if you could shoot, go one for one. But Kenny, you want any comments?
Well, he's certainly no friend to Northrop and
no,
and these other firms. He's not encouraging the war. He's saying we can't give these things away.
He's very much contrarian to that. But Mike, you want to jump in?
But wait a minute. Per the other guy, the other thing we listened to, it isn't Yemen who's supplying the missiles. It's Iran.
Well,
so the missiles are coming from Iran, the ones that are hitting the ships.
That's not true.
That's not true.
They have their own indigenous missile. I mean,
wait a minute. Wait a second. Slow down.
They may be based on designs that ultimately come from Iran, but from
Iran.
Yemenis have their own indigenous production. They can't ship. They've been under blockade from the U.S. Navy and other navies for years. There's no way the Iranians could ship in that many missiles, and obviously they're not going to go through like Saudi Arabia with fighting them. So they need to make all those missiles and drones. They have to have an indigenous production. So all the manufacturing takes place in Yemen. Again, some parts of the designs are clearly again based on stuff that the Iranians have given them.
You're saying Yemen has industries. Do they also make automobiles and water heaters?
I don't know about automobiles.
What about water heaters?
I'm sure they make such. Water heaters aren't too complicated. I'm sure they have their own industry. Sure.
They have their own industry. I mean, the way you're talking about it.
They've been under fighting they fought a 7-year long war against Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates from 2015 on, and they beat them. They kept from collapsing. If they didn't have their own, ability to, keep their infrastructure and other things going, keep their.
Wait a minute. When you're saying they
enough fuel and so on,
you mean they beat them because they were not completely overrun? Is that what you're saying? That was the win?
Not just that, they struck back. They're able to destroy Saudi oil refineries, and essentially the Saudis cried uncle after a while because it was too much of the abilities of the Houthis to use their drones and missiles to attack Saudi and United Arab Emirati oil facilities. That was too big a threat to their economy that they could do real economic. And they were doing real economic. I mean, they shut down a good part of Saudi oil production for several months. They overwhelmed the patriots that we gave to them. They couldn't, this happened. Was it 2019? Was right 2018.
You're
They
denying the concept that it's a completely proxy war from Iran. That
yeah
Iran supplies the drones and the
there's a part of
missiles.
that, but the all the different parties, Hezbollah, Hamas, the different forces in Iraq, they have their own they make their own independent decisions. Iran can influence them, but it's not like, oh, Iran has some general who's giving orders to the Yemeni government. They make their own, they're it's more of a, that they're allies. And
Well,
they
no,
have,
no, no, no. No, stop it. Wait a minute. You're changing the topic. I'm not talking about concepts and instructions. I'm talking about hardware.
again,
Hardware.
they have domestic production. All these, and it's clear. You can see again how they've improved. They've improved on what the technology the Iranians, gave to them, because they, the Yemenis, they actually created their own surface to air missiles that upgraded basically the Russian technology that they had. They were, making longer ranged, bigger, that were able to shoot down some Saudi airplanes over time. And then the same thing with they've built drones that have, increasingly long range, and, bigger drones with a bigger payload that, obviously can do more damage to a ship. So, I mean, if they were just dependent on Iran, then they couldn't do this. They couldn't continually, improve their military technology if they were, dependent on Iran.
Okay.
Yeah.
But then, and now that's good. Now we're in trouble because Jim's here and he's going to know what actually is going on. So Jim, Michael and excuse me, Alexander and I are in a little bit of a dispute. I don't know what I'm talking about. He seems to say he knows what he's talking about. He's saying Yemen is actually constructing the missiles and drones that they're using to attack the ships, and that they used in the conflict they had with Saudi Arabia. And I'm saying, no, it's a proxy state. They're getting all their weapons from Iran. The hardware comes from Iran. They should say Iran could give them the hardware and say, do what you want with it. Don't your job. But it's coming from Iran.
Can I ask a question before we go to Jim?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Hold on, Jim. You got time to look it up on the internet. Go ahead, Mike.
The question is, are the Houthis the official government of Yemen as of now?
You're muted, Ken.
Oh, they're still a rebel force. They're not in charge of the government.
It depends. Recognized by who? Not
So,
recognized by the
yeah.
But they're effectively, the government.
No, wait, no, wait a second. Are they the government of Yemen? That's excuse me. That's important when you're talking about international law and international agreements. Are they considered the government of Yemen? I mean, you can say any rebel force. You could say Trump is the president of the United States if you want. But the fact of the matter is, I'd like to know, and the answer that I'm looking for is whether or not they are the government of Yemen.
Again, according to who? Not according to the U.S. The U.S. Recognizes these guys who are actually not in Yemen. They're in Riyadh. Kind of, they're Saudi puppets. But and even they haven't. The only way that would work is, again, if those guys in Riyadh had authorized some kind of attack, which I haven't heard anything.
Okay, let me ask this in a yes or no question then. Are they the government of an internationally recognized state? Are they the internationally recognized government of an internationally recognized state?
Well, they're recognized by some states.
The Cabinet of Yemen refers to the governing body of the internationally recognized government of the Republic of Yemen, led by its president, Rashid al-Alimi, who is also the chairman of the Presidential Leadership Council, the governing body of Yemeni Republic. As part of the 2015 Yemeni civil war, and And it goes on, right? As part of the civil war, the cabinet authority is contested by the Houthis, who took over the capital, Sana'a, in an armed rebellion against the government and formed the Supreme Revolutionary Committee and Supreme Political Council in 2015. President Hadi then declared Aden as the temporary capital. So it's going on, and that's all. I won't make it. I won't even make any smart ass comments about it.
All right, look, there are three. The country's divided up into basically four areas. The area, most of the coastline along the Red Sea, let's say the western part of the country, the north western part of the country, is controlled by the Presidential Leadership Council. Excuse me, the Supreme Political Council, which is essentially dominated by Ansar Allah, the Houthis. Houthi is the name of a family. The origins of the Houthi movement. The guy went to Iran after the revolution because that part of the country has a particular variant of Shia Islam, and one that actually is rather messianic in its origins, that gives them a blood tie directly to the Prophet Muhammad. And so they can invoke that. So, but that's the Supreme Political Council, the SPC. Now, the government itself is further south. That's the Presidential Leadership Council. They have an entity. They have a couple of enclaves. They have one way up in the northeast of the country, and then they have control of a little enclave in the southwest of the country, which borders the Red Sea. They also control a sizable portion of the country in the east and the middle of the country. That's controlled by the Presidential Leadership. The Presidential Leadership Council. Then you have the Southern Transitional Council that is controlled by the United Arab Emirates, and that particular entity controls Aden itself. That's Aden on the Indian Ocean. And then there's an entity inside the sort of a little bit north of surrounded by the Southern Transitional Council and the Houthi area, and that's controlled by Al Qaeda. That's the area. Remember that American who was killed by a drone strike? The guy they took off the internet because he was such an effective Salafist preacher, and they knocked him out. He was a guy from New Mexico or someplace like that. Or he was from California. They killed his ass a couple of years ago. So that's three areas that are divided up. But where the launching into the Red Sea is going on is along the major ports along the Red Sea, particularly Al Hudaydah. Now, the issue of the missiles, it's a mixed bag. They have their own internal capability. They built that up in terms of the civil war that was waged starting around 2004. It went through 6 phases up to 2010, 11, and then the Houthi family basically. One of them is in charge of their whole political movement. It's a sort of an extended family. But in terms of their capability of launching missile strikes, yeah, of course, it certainly was dependent and integrated into the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, the Quds Force, the Special Operations Force of the IRGC that went down there, along with Lebanese Hezbollah. But they are sort of their own independent entity in a way. I mean, they're all cooperating together. This has been right from the start on October 7th. That was the day that the Hamas leadership in Beirut called for a multi-front war. That was called on that day, later in the day, by Hamas on the 7th. They called for everybody in the axis of resistance, Hezbollah, the Houthis, the militias in Syria, the militias in Iraq. They called them all to join together, and on the West Bank, they called them all to join together and resist Israel. So what we've been seeing, really, in different ways, is this going on from the start. And what the Houthis did the first week was they shot a missile at Eilat, but the intervention into the Red Sea itself, they announced that on the 16th of October, and then took that vessel on the 19th, the one where they come in on the helicopter and seize the that ship, and then they still have that. And so they are going to just, go back and forth with the United States. They actually, been baiting the United States, have been baiting the NATO powers in terms of their support of Israel with Gaza, particularly the United States. So this, the question of whether an air raid or air strikes will stop them is a difficult issue, because it did once. Because remember, they've been subjected to air bombardment from the United States for quite a long time, particularly when the Saudis intervened on the side that was, the people of the Presidential Leadership Council, the government in Yemen. We had intervened on their side, and the Saudis encountered a real hornet's nest. And during that period of time, the people that were the Houthis were being bombarded by the U.S. They were bombarded by the Saudi Air Force, and from their point of view, they sort of have a temporary ceasefire going on there. They reached that about 2 years ago. So what's going on right now is whether this will be broken apart by what has just happened in the past month, or particularly since November, when the escalation occurred, and then what's occurred last week with the strikes of the United States. There's about 100 plus attacks on shipping before they did what they did. That is, the United States reacted with this, Operation Protective Guardian, OPG, or whatever it is. I think that's what their moniker is. And another problem there is you have an Iranian task force, a naval task force down there, piddling away. Now, I don't know if you guys talked about what just happened the past day or two with the Iranians launching a strike into Pakistan, and then at the same time striking in Erbil, what they considered a Mossad headquarters, but what really turned out to be a facility run by the Kurdish Democratic Party, the KDP, in Erbil. But I think we talked about this last night when we were discussing the latest bullshit. But they hit that particular target in Pakistan. And what's interesting about the Baluchis is that there is a movement that started in the 70s and 80s that was sort of a fundamentalist Islamic movement, and it's had splits, but it has been definitely involved in direct combat with Iran. And they renamed themselves. They had a splinter group. They split up. They had created 4 different groups. But the question is, who's supporting them? Now, some argue that the United States was involved with that as a way to put pressure on the Iranian Revolution after the overthrow of the Shah. And there, again, I don't have any evidence of that. I can't say one way or the other if that's true or not. The question of ISI being involved is an interesting issue, because they directly hit Pakistan, and they hit targets inside Pakistan associated with that particular movement. So here you have a situation which is sort of new, that they're striking directly with their conventional military power in the midst of all this stuff going on. Iran is. So anyway, that's a little bit about the Houthis. The Houthis, they want to escalate this for their own political reasons. So the United States is going to be confronted with a difficult situation. What to do about this? It's already impacted on the flow of commerce through the Bab el Mandab. They've had to start to shift with an extra 2 to 3 weeks cargo around the Cape of Good Hope. And that's going to keep on increasing. And of course, it's cost about Egypt. It's had a hit on the Egyptian economy because they've lost revenue going through the Suez Canal. No, so the Houthis is a very interesting phenomenon, but one that has essentially been in war nonstop with little breaks since 2003, 2004. They've been constantly in war. And so it's a group that's really motivated to fight, and they have Islamic theological justifications to fight. I mean, check out their battle flag. Death to Israel, death to Jews. I mean, it's like pretty explicit. Death to America. And so this basically is like a wet dream for some of these guys to have a direct confrontation with the United States. Anyway.
Okay, Jim, what's the truth of the fact that it's a proxy war? Iran is providing all of the weapons, all of the missiles and drones. Alex says they got their own factories. They're making,
Yeah, got their own factories, but then of course they cooperate with the Iranians. So it's a mixed bag. I mean, they have the capability with the help they got from the Hezbollah and the Iranians. Remember, they launched that big strike against refinery capability in Saudi Arabia. They knocked out about 1/3 of the refinery capability of Saudi Arabia by a drone attack. And so they had the ability with cooperation. They're cooperating in a loose. The question is who's calling the shots. I mean, does the Iranians, the Iranians were responding. They took this initiative. I mean, again, what's the calculation of the Iranians to do something that they did when they attacked a target directly in Iraq, and they attacked a target directly in Pakistan, and then the issue was who took responsibility. Remember, there was a celebration of Soleimani, the guy that we killed in Baghdad, and ISIS. Now, who knows who did that? But there was 2 suicide bombers who killed about 100 people in Tehran when they were celebrating the anniversary of the death of Soleimani, and that happened in the midst of this stuff going on, with the Gaza. That happened. When that happened? About 2 weeks ago. The past 2 weeks that happened.
Oh, really?
Less than a week ago.
Oh yeah, about a week ago. So there's
2 suicide bombers 2 weeks ago in
they were
Iran.
In Kerman,
by Tehran, and they killed a whole bunch of Iranians at a memorial for the guy that we killed. Now, who knows who did that? Because ISIS took responsibility for it. But it could be plausible deniability. It could have been. Who knows, given the craziness of the Middle East. It could have been ISIS, because ISIS has been repressed by the Iranians. The Iranians came in, and there was a loose cooperation between the United States and Iran to maintain that. And so the whole fighting that went on 2015, 2016 was a combination of U.S. force and Iranian force with their proxies, because the Iranians came in big time and mobilized people to fight against ISIS, but so did the United States. So who took credit for that? But they're sort of blaming it on ISIS. So ISIS as a whole, was it ISIS or was it who? They have their own damn reasons to go in and do that against the Iranians. But I'm just telling you that happened in the past week or so. That suicide bombing in Tehran. So all this is there's all the fighting going on in the Lebanese border, the Syrian border, but particularly the border with Lebanon. The Israelis are made it clear they've got mobilized force to go attack them. Some of the more ultra-right Israelis have threatened to push the line up to the Litani River, which is what they did before they withdrew back in '82. Actually in the late '80s when Sharon, I think, withdrew them, I think Sharon withdrew them from Lebanon. But there was that whole big affair when they were involved in Lebanon for a long time, and then they abandoned the Christian. It's all a big fucked up mess. But they were up to the Litani River, and now, of course, the ultra right is talking about moving the border back up to the Litani River, and basically establishing a buffer up there by pushing the Lebanese Hezbollah further off into that part of Lebanon. And the problem with that is that if you know anything about the ultra right composition of Netanyahu's cabinet, It includes people who believe that Eretz Israel should be up to that. They go back to King Solomon's, the map of King Solomon's Israel, and it was sort of up there in that area historically. Now they impose that map on the Middle East and say, well, this is our objective. And so those are people who are part of that cabinet, and they are arguing to launch operations up there. Now, the Israelis have denied him, but the same bullshit is going on. These ultra-right guys have been independently talking about expulsing all the Palestinians from the Gaza. And if you recall, in the past 2 months, they were caught negotiating with the Congo to have them agree to take Palestinians. And that, of course, was denied by Netanyahu and is not in the interest of the United States in our foreign policy. These kind of things are where I'm sure there must be real humdinger.
I thought they were talking to Eric Adams about putting them up in the Bronx, too.
Well, anyway.
Maybe not. My question on it, really, seriously, how can you have any development of technology to establish, to manufacture, to correct, to test, to implement? You have to have a stable society with employees and equipment and maintenance and all kinds of things. You don't just sit down and put together a drone using a cigar box and some suspenders.
Fighting. These guys have been, look, they go in there with military aid. They're in the middle of a war. The Lebanese and the
the Iranians come in and set things up.
They train them. There's no doubt about it. They advise them, they train them, but they're not stupid. That particular part of Yemen. I mean, Jesus Christ, they were in the 6-day war. One of Nasser intervenes inside Yemen, and a certain percentage of his army was down there fighting against insurgency in Yemen at the same time that the whole 6-day war crisis escalated in June of 1967. And
not just that, Jim, but in the 60s they expelled the British. The British tried to hold on to like their little colony around Aden in southern Yemen, and they fought a brutal war against
they fought. Yeah,
they became southern Yemen, and they lost that. They got kicked. We're talking like SAS,
Well, yeah. There was further. The fighting was further east after they established their Marxist regime. Those guys were then threatening the British presence in Oman, which again the British were able to thwart in their counterinsurgency operations. But yes, indeed, it was a big back and forth on that. But in any event, these guys are. I was on a seminar today in Sana. I got on this seminar. It was very interesting. It was a think tank in Sana, and it was interesting. It was in Sana. All right. It was in the area that the Houthis control, and it was a think tank about basically like sort of going to the Brookings Institution by a seminar, and they were very thoughtful. They had people, experts. They're conducting it in Arabic and English, and it was really interesting. They were talking about their country, and they basically were objectively assessing the United States' reaction, and they basically said, what's going to be? Has to be a resolution of the Palestinian conflict. Was their argument. There has to be a settlement of the Arab-Israeli, of the Palestine-Israel conflict in order for the Houthis to stand down. Now, they also admitted that the Houthis have a reason right now for their own purposes, because they're having problems governing, to have a war. And the great enemy is America. They've been talking about fighting America for years. So now they finally have a chance to directly confront the United States. And so the question is, how productive or counterproductive will it be a bombing campaign to deter them? It worked a couple of years ago, but it looks like now they don't give a fuck. They're basically saying, okay, you guys want it, we're going to get it on. We're going to help our Palestinian brothers and sisters. And they're getting popular support throughout the Middle East for that. They certainly have it inside Yemen, and they've gotten and you can certainly see they would probably have popular support for that kind of direct confrontation throughout the street in the Arab world, in the Islamic world. So that's another. They argued that perspective pretty persuasively, actually. Anyway.
Okay, thanks, Jim. That's excellent. Really, background. Mike, you got something more to say?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, one of the general conclusions we've found out in the past few days is that if and this is not my main point, but if Israel and the Palestinians the Israelis and the Palestinians would somehow magically disappear out of the Middle East tomorrow, there would still never be any peace in the Middle East. But that being said, Alex and the two guys in a very non-journalistic way who were discussing the situation in that clip, the part of the clip I saw, have made a very persuasive argument that what the United States, along with the UK and whoever else wants to get in on it, what they should do is to have a massive strike against the Houthis. If the Houthis, which by the way are absolutely no doubt about it, just like Hamas, an absolutely racist organization. There's nothing comparable. In other words, they're comparable to the Nazi regime. By the way, in Nazi occupied Europe during World War II, there were a lot of countries that supported, or a lot of large segments of the population that supported the Holocaust, that supported the internment and murder of Jews. So, yeah, things like that are popular. Racism is always popular among racists. But the fact is, the Houthis are a racist organization. Okay. That being said, if the only way we can do it, both financially and non-symbolically, is to stop their attacks on shipping, then it would have to be a massive strike that would take them out. Precision bombing, strategic bombing, take out their manufacturing facilities, et cetera, et cetera. And since they're not an actual recognized government, internationally recognized, that is recognized by an overwhelming majority of the international community, and by the United Nations, then, it wouldn't even be a war against an actual state. So Alex has made that argument that would probably be the best thing to do, because if they keep on attacking shipping, well, neither the United States nor most countries, I'd say, who use any supplies that are shipped through that area, can tolerate that. They can't continue to tolerate it. This time it could be the excuse of the Gaza war. Next time it could be another excuse. So the argument seems to be, rather than these, and I'm not saying I agree with this, but the argument that seems to be making, that I'm saying the correct argument or the correct thing to do, seems to be just take them out. Take out the Houthis. You're not going to, get rid of every Houthi. You may not even be able to get them out of the areas they control. But yeah, if you have a massive campaign, a massive military operation against them, done in a short period of time, yeah, you can probably stop them from doing any significant damage to any shipping in the area. But it seems to me that we seem to be in this place in the world where we, and it's one thing to allow a racist regime to operate within its own borders, but to allow them to operate outside of their borders in other words, as a racist, to disseminate that racism outside of their borders. God, I don't know. What's the world going to come to? You can't. I know the left can argue, oh, yeah, Hamas had a reason to do that. Well, Nazi Germany had a reason for doing anything. There comes a point where you have to say, look, whatever we support, we're not going that far. And with the Houthis, it seems, by the way, reports I saw today, just a little side note, said that some of the attacks were designed to disrupt the line of communication with Iran. I haven't the foggiest idea how those attacks were designed to do that, but they claim that there's been some success in that area. But I don't think the attacks that were launched by the US and the UK were designed to eliminate the threat. Basically, they just, upped the ante and said, okay, you want to play this game, you're going to keep on doing it no matter what we say, no matter what we do, then here's an example of what we're going to do. And if they downgraded their ability 10 or 15%, that's a pretty good example. But if the Houthis are going to keep on attacking the shipping, and they're going to say, no, we're going to keep on doing this, or we're going to escalate or something like that, then again, seems to be no choice but to up the ante significantly until the Houthis can no longer stay in the hand. Anyway, that's a general idea of where I am.
Well, on the issue of racism, a good part of the world supported the racist regime of apartheid South Africa for 40 years. So I agree with Mike there that racism has not been, and including the United States. Remember, it's the United States helped the South Africans find Nelson Mandela. In fact, our own CIA did to have him arrested.
And the United States itself was racist, and still is to a large degree. The policies of the United States were racist for a long time, but it's contained within.
Of course, the other point I'll make is that point. Israel was one of the biggest supporters of apartheid South Africa, to the extent of helping them to get nuclear weapons. So I wouldn't exclude the racism in Israel, Mike.
But no, Israel wasn't exporting any racism to supporting another country. There's various reasons to do that. In other words, Israel had a siege mentality, which it still has, in fact. So they're going to say anybody who supports us, we're going to support them. And it was South Africa that offered their support to Israel, that was supportive of Israel.
Yeah, Israel was working with South Africa in Angola and other parts of Africa.
Right.
So they weren't just operating; they were operating internationally in support.
No, but they were. What I'm trying to say is, no, Alex.
Basically, Mike. Before you get off
point, Alex. The point I made was that it's bad enough, and I'm not saying it's a good thing; it's a horrible thing. But if somebody has a racism within their borders, that's one thing. When they go over their borders to do racist things outside of their borders, then that's something else. So giving military aid, but not to perform racist acts. I mean,
that's what many would argue correctly. I think that the Israeli occupation of lands outside of their borders is an example, which again, as multiple human rights organizations have said, including Israeli human rights organizations, is apartheid in the West Bank, in Gaza, in Israel itself. So both within Israel's 1967 borders and outside of it. So that actually meets your criteria there.
Well, actually, yeah, it does, in my opinion, but it doesn't. It's dubious in the international opinion, because Israel gained that territory as a result of a war that they claim, even though it was a preemptive strike, was absolutely necessary because of an existential threat against them. Things we get into gray area. There's so many gray areas. However, when somebody is a racist regime, when their main reason, one of the main reasons for being, which I think the Houthis and Hamas and Hezbollah, I'm not quite so sure about that, but when their main thing is they want to wipe out, in other words, to say, which both parties have said, and it's in the Houthis' charter, it's not actually as explicit in Hamas's charter, which is death to all Jews. Sorry, that takes it outside of the borders of their own country, and that's saying they are going to perform racist acts outside of those borders. Plus the fact we have to think in terms of degrees. Just like there are gray areas, in World War II, the United States was, you have to, in my opinion, at least to some degree, racist. Okay, the United States was a racist country, even though there was no longer any slavery, but there was still Jim Crow perpetrated down south. Our military was segregated. It's a racist country. But when you have a far more racist and far more lethally racist country like Nazi Germany, yeah, you have to support the United States against Nazi Germany. You have to consider the degrees of racism. In Israel right now, you have guys, I mean, this whole thing about shipping people to the Congo, I mean, give me a break. I mean, but this is a Netanyahu government, and these are people within the government. Even Netanyahu apparently thought that went too far, although we don't know what he really thought. But you got these people, these nutcases in the Israeli government who are coming up with this, not just racist, but insane stuff. But is that as bad as having an entire government in their charter, in their reason for being, as to, wiping out? If the Israeli government would say, our reason for being, the reason for Israel's existence is to wipe out all Palestinians, well, first of all, that would be, first of all, that's not true, obviously, absolutely not true. But if that was the case, we would have to say, hey, that's more racist. So right now, whatever you're going to say about Israel, I think Hamas and the Houthis represent a more insidious threat, a greater threat. This does not mean that what, some Israeli minister saying, let's deport all the Palestinians, that doesn't mean it's right. It just means that just because they're doing something wrong, doesn't mean you support something that's worse. That's all.
Right, Mike. But Ken, I wanted to do another clip.
Oh, wait a minute. Let's just get Jim. Any follow up?
Look, I've been listening to translated discussions of people in the Middle East for 50 years of my life. And, you sit there and listen to their all these different leaders when they really say to their publics. And so I've heard them come out with, kill the Jews, kill the Jews, kill the Jews, kill the Jews, on and on and on. And, that's what's going on there. Now, in the midst of all that, you have some of the Israeli body politic who comes out with, kill the Arabs, kill the Arabs, kill the Arabs, kill the Arabs. So, the question of racism, people like to throw that around in all different ways. Yeah, of course they're racist because look what Hamas just, Hamas leader just referred to the quote so-called Holocaust past couple of days, which, and then remember there was that big conference in Tehran to disprove the Holocaust even happened. And they had such luminaries like David Irving fly to Tehran to participate. So, it goes back and forth. There's, thank God, not everybody in these different societies wants to have the societies forever locked in mortal Armageddon warfare. But unfortunately, right now, the dogs of war are unleashed. And so until cooler heads prevail, which, hopefully will happen at some point soon, we're left with this kind of crazy situation to watch all the time.
Okay, Alex, play your magic. Do your magic.
I know. I presume you guys didn't discuss this because it's kind of not been a big story here in the U.S., but this is big in Germany, which is these really big protests and that are having an effect on the rise of the far right in Germany. Because I don't know if Jim's seen it, but there's a recent poll that shows the alternative for Deutschland, which is the AfD, which is a kind of crypto Nazi party, is actually again in this one poll leading all parties. So if that's true, that's scary. But again, it's a result of, we'll see we're seeing all these big protests as well. So again, the kind of rise of the right. So let's play this from DW. Of course, has a lot of coverage of this.
Energy prices, jobs, immigration, industries being destroyed.
Support is being sent everywhere, but not here. When you think about how our schools look, that's really sad.
We professional hunters declare our solidarity with the farmers.
We can't cope with all the burdens from the government. It needs to change.
Most importantly, the government needs to resign and order new elections because they're incompetent.
Welcome to the day. We start here in Berlin, where thousands of tractors and trucks have converged on the German capital as angry farmers protest against cuts in agricultural subsidies and increasing regulation. Monday's rally concludes a week of protests, including the blockade of motorway on-ramps across the country. The demonstrations have tapped into a groundswell of dissatisfaction over cost of living increases in German society.
Trucks and tractors have already been blocking the streets of Berlin for more than a week. On Monday, around 10,000 farmers turned out, parking their vehicles in the center of the capital to draw attention to their demands. They want more financial help from the government, otherwise they say farming is under threat. But for many protesters, this is about more than agriculture. Energy prices, jobs, immigration, industry is being destroyed. We have to do something. It's no longer just about farmers and diesel, it's about everything. The government has to go. It's not just farmers who are joining in, it's almost a popular uprising. The government is not listening, and above all, it's not listening to the people in rural areas. If you wanted to be mean, you could say this politics favors urban areas while rural areas are being left behind, and we're protesting against this. When the German finance minister faced the crowd, he said farmers had to make a contribution in difficult times. But he outlined his position that the government cannot help with more cash. Subsidies for agricultural diesel will not expire immediately. They will be reduced step by step over the coming years. I can't promise you more state aid from the federal budget today, but we can fight together for you to enjoy more freedom and respect for your work. Lindner's words did not go down well. He was shouted down. Farmers' leaders called for the crowd to give the minister a hearing, but also restated their plan to keep protesting. If the government withdraws the plan to raise taxes, we will remove the tractors from the street. As long as they won't do that, we will continue to make use of our constitutional right to demonstrate. These noisy protests are becoming a problem for Olaf Scholz's government. If they're not willing to roll back their cuts, the farmers look likely to stay camped in Berlin for some time to come.
Well, that report from DW political correspondent Simon Young, who joins us now. Oh, welcome, Simon. So the farmers are just the latest manifestation of unrest within Germany. Let's start with them. What do they want?
Well, Phil, the government is withdrawing hundreds of millions of euros worth of subsidies to agriculture. In particular, this is about the subsidies for diesel for farmers, but it's also, for instance, the government's withdrawing an exemption on road taxes for agricultural vehicles. They're also complaining about some other things like bureaucracy and environmental and animal welfare standards, for instance, which they say are too burdensome and make them uncompetitive. And all this at a time when farmers say it's becoming more and more difficult to make a living, and many farmers are in fact getting out of the business. So you've got these pretty angry protests, and farmers say unless all these plans for cuts from the government are withdrawn, they're just going to go on protesting. So you've got a stalemate, I think, at the moment.
Right, and but the government did make some concessions, but clearly not enough for these farmers.
Well, they did. They've already said that they'll sort of smooth this over a bit. The diesel subsidies will be withdrawn over 3 years rather than immediately, and that might make it a little bit easier. They've also talked about introducing, for instance, a levy on the price of food to cover those kind of animal welfare standards, but it's hard to see how that really helps if it pushes up the price of food. The government's talked about introducing some reforms or changes to its plans by the summer. That probably, I think, will be too late. Now the coalition parties are saying they're going to get together and see if they can, come up with something that will appease the farmers even later this week. But given that the government has said, this is about saving money, there's a big hole in the national budget at the moment. Given the difficulties there, it's hard to see how they can really, give back very much, unless, of course, they say, right, we'll scrap the plans altogether and start with a new negotiation right from the beginning. But they don't look set to do that at the moment.
And tell us about these reports and rumors that many of these farmers' demonstrations have been infiltrated by Germany's far right.
Well, that's it. The farmers' union has said it's very concerned to make sure that that isn't the case. They say farmers are just exercising their democratic right to protest. I'm sure that is true in the overwhelming number of cases. Having said that, as you saw in those clips, a lot of the people supporting these protests, are saying that this goes beyond farming, really. It's about wider issues like the cost of living that's making life difficult for people across Germany. It's about migration. It's about money being sent to support Ukraine. A lot of people are angry. It's easy to see how in that context, far-right parties can sort of seek to make ground. Police say that they have picked up some calls by anti-state and populist far-right groups to sort of join these protests and get involved. So that there's concern definitely about that.
Okay. Thank you for that, Simon. Simon Young, a DW political correspondent.
Okay, so that's, I think, pretty interesting. Again, obviously, Germany is really important in the European political context. So if they have, having such a massive protest is a big issue. But Ken, you want to, we put Ken to sleep a little bit. Mike, you want to jump in with any comments, or Jim? You guys want to mute?
Well, it seems like the far right, it's dubious as to whether or not the far right has infiltrated this movement. So I don't know. I mean, certainly the far right is going to try to cash in on it politically, but whether or not that's successful, I don't know. The problem that's happening is this is just an international problem. It's an environmental problem. There's only so much to go around, and there's less now. I mean, the whole problem of migration has to do with the fact that, the whole problem of migration is only going to get worse because there are going to be places that are not livable or not as livable today. We are a more spoiled, civilization. The human race is more spoiled now than it was, let's say, 150 or 120 years ago, as far as our living standards. So, there's need for more stuff and there's less stuff available. The government's saying there's only so much money to go around, and the farmers are saying, well, it doesn't matter, we need more. I don't know what the solution is, where they want to decrease environmental standards. If you decrease environmental standards, then the environment gets worse, and you have the whole situation over and over again, worse so. So I don't know.
And also, but it really connects back to the energy issue, because of course, if they likely wouldn't. Well, they wouldn't be having this problem so certainly so badly if they kept getting Russian oil. That's what pushing the price
to be quite honest with you, Alex, I don't think that's it. I don't think they were. I mean, only with the idea of diesel, perhaps. But even so, I mean, that's a even if they got Russian oil, it's a temporary fix to a situation. That's really not going to do much good. However, if you want to do something, invite Frank should be here because Frank would argue then that this movement is being manipulated by the Russians.
Right, he probably would.
So we don't know. I mean, to me, it just seems like these are farmers at this point who are upset.
Yeah.
But as far as
it's similar to something we spoke about, a few months ago when it was happening with the Dutch farmers. They had a very similar protest movement, and actually, in that case, the party that took over, who won the Dutch elections, was basically a farmers' party. So this could even lead to a political farmers political movement. Obviously, they're definitely more involved now. But Jim, did you want to add anything as we let, I guess, Kenny's?
Well, it just shows me that Putin's a despicable piece of shit, because it's clear that these kind of movements. I mean, check it out. He benefits from the worst reactionary elements in Western societies. Forget about Frank's discussions about the left, because those to me are interesting to listen to at best. But here you have a situation in Germany which has these kind of trends have been accelerated. The 2008 crash accelerated these trends politically. There was a Tea Party movement in the United States. There was similar phenomena all throughout Europe. They cut back the social democratic benefits that have been part of the contract with the populations in all these European societies because of the recessionary trends. I listened to somebody at that time from the United Nations come, and it was mind-boggling. They knocked out 30-40% of the social benefits throughout the European countries in the EU. So there's one problem. That's been sort of turning away at the social fabric since that period of time. The second thing is the question that gets back to the way that these societies react to immigrants coming in particular, since they have higher percentages of their society. France has higher percentages of immigrants coming in from predominantly Muslim countries. So that is a ground for cultural clash. But this has been going on for quite a long time. These kind of clashes inside Germany with the Turks, all these kind of things. A friend of mine used to work for the German public radio. He was covering hostels being burned by neo-Nazis in the aftermath of the fall of the Soviet Union in Eastern Germany. So all these kind of tensions have been going on. So it gets me to see them exacerbated. And to you to raise the question, okay, they're reacting to the issue of the conflict in the Ukraine and how it's exacerbated oil prices. There's no doubt about it. But, the problem I have with all this is who benefits from this politically, in the sense that it forces one to align with essentially a reactionary hegemonic power, and that is in the case of Russia, expanding its power and taking advantage of these domestic tensions inside these societies to its own advantage. The rise of the right, the rise of the Nazi right is all throughout Europe. Everywhere there's an upsurge of these movements for the past 25 to 30 years. There's no doubt about it. And there's a sort of international solidarity with that. And then again, look at someone like Bannon, who's in the background of this campaign with Trump. He's someone who's into, sort of a popular front of neo-fascists and neo-Nazis around the world unite. And again, that's where one has to squarely. I mean, I'm not going to get. These are concrete facts. They're not like, I'm not like dealing with the sort of machination, type stuff that Frank loves to get into with this stuff. But there's no doubt that the Russians are involved with supporting or looking on these kind of movements with a favorable attitude. So, that's part of the crazy mix we're living with right now as global citizens, and these trends in Germany are disturbing. We know that right now, 1 billion people in the world are affected this year by elections around the world. If you add everybody up, 1 billion people of humanity are affected by elections. I think it's even higher than that. It's 1.5 billion. So lots to say, lots to look at in terms of what's going to happen in the next couple of months. This year is going to be a year of turmoil equivalent to 1968.
Yeah. All right. So I think Ken, but yeah. So I just wanted to do one little more story again. I thought we'd do something local, which about this. Well, this of course is New York, but yeah, let's hear what ABC News, our local station, has to say here.
Underground for the suspect.
Darla Miles, live at Columbus Circle. Darla?
Well, Sandra, Columbus Circle, as you know, is a major transportation hub. It has the A, C, B, D, and number 1 lines. And I spent more than an hour down there today watching NYPD officers go diligently in and out of each train that stopped at the station, searching for the suspects. The irony of this, when we spoke to strap hangers, they've been asking for a heightened police presence for some time now. They got it today, but for a different reason.
Just got off the train today, and I've seen about like maybe 5 or 6 cops. They just walking down, checking the train.
Strap hangers at Columbus Circle Wednesday afternoon, noticing a heightened police presence. Each train stopping at the station is searched by an NYPD officer, checking every single car before it pulls out of the station. They're looking for this man seen in surveillance video, a suspect in 5 stabbings in both Queens and Brooklyn.
I noticed it here in the 2nd Avenue station, down further downtown. I noticed it, yes.
Shortly after this morning's double stabbing in Brooklyn, the NYPD flooding subway stations across the city, operating on the theory the suspect hopped on the train while fleeing the scene. Officers are seen looking down at their phones during the search, presumably to cross-reference the surveillance images with people riding on the train. This strap hanger told me she'd seen a lot of police at various subway stations today. Kew Gardens, here, and Sutphin. The police response, the second highest alert level remobilization, when it has to tap into additional resources for large-scale incidents, like a massive protest or emergency. The search for a suspect randomly stabbing innocent people is an emergency for the NYPD to find him before it happens again.
I don't think he's on the subway because, usually when people do things, they're not going to hide out where they just did things at. They're going to try to get away from the area.
Hey, quick question to you. Are you a technology professional and want to learn multi-cloud and DevOps in a hands-on way?
Still, the NYPD presumably will continue these diligent subway searches until the suspect is identified and arrested. Reporting live at Columbus Circle, Darla Miles, Channel 7, Eyewitness News.
Darla, thank you very much. NYPD headquarters, the police talking about this very suspect. Let's take a listen.
These are senseless, unprovoked attacks, and the NYPD is working around the clock to identify and locate the person responsible and to stop this violence. Our investigators believe that each of these assaults were committed by the same person, and we're here today because somebody knows him. They know his name, they know where he lives, and they know who his friends are. And they know the fastest, safest way to get this menace off of our streets. And we're going to find him, and we're going to do that with your help. Obviously, this person is armed and dangerous. So if you know something or see something related to the case, call the NYPD immediately, either through 911 or by dialing 1-800-577-TIPS. You can also submit a tip online at the Crime Stoppers website. Lastly, I want to thank the members of the media for amplifying this information and getting this important information out. We're stronger when we work together. We're safer when we work together. And together, we will bring this person to justice. Now I'll turn it over to Chief Patrol John Shell, who'll go over some of the events.
Good evening. We're here today to make the public aware of 5 stabbing incidents that occurred within the last 9 days. 3 of them this morning between 7:30 and 8:30. one on January 16th past midnight in the Rochdale section of Queens and Jamaica section of Queens, both in the confines of the 113 and the 103 precinct. We have an unidentified individual who's walking around the street, randomly stabbing people with a hunting knife. There is no connection to the individuals, and it seems to be unprovoked. The description is following: male, black, light-skinned, in his 20s, 5'6", slim build, braids in his hair, wearing a green jacket and a black hoodie. Sneakers are white Converse and sometimes black and white Adidas. He's wearing a lanyard sometimes and a surgical mask sometimes. The subject, in some cases, tries to make statements to the victims, but they don't understand what he's saying. In one case, it was a fight, an argument on a bus that went out into the street. The incidents involved 4 males and 1 female. The female is 34 years old. The males range from 36 to 74. The injuries are all non-life-threatening. The times, they've occurred from midnight to 8:30 in the morning. Like I said, 3 this morning, we're within an hour. We have mobilized many resources from the department, police officers, detectives, to the 113, the 103 precinct, citywide transit, including our buses. We have posted wanted posters on our social media. Like the commissioner said, thank you for the media for amplifying this incident. Community leaders, elected officials, our community affairs units have all been on the street with this poster. Our citywide manhunt will continue 24/7 until he's apprehended.
So I guess we're just gonna keep going on. All right. So Mike or Jim, how worried are you about all this?
Well, you know, is Ken here, by the way? All right.
Now he's up.
All right. You know, New York is filled with lunatic motherfuckers. All right. I mean, I had just this past 2 weeks 4 encounters with assholes like this, where I have to sort of check it out, you know, check myself out. You know, 3 guys I sat, it was crowded buses. You know, one guy's giving me shit because I had something. I'm standing. He says, "Get your ass out of my," you know, like stupid shit like this. And so one always has to, you know, that's part of living in New York. You know, you have to go into like semi-hostile, on alert attitude with people, and that's a drag. And someone like this, who is obviously out of his gourd, you know, I'm always thinking whenever I see things like this in the subways, you know, okay, what's going on here? Now, remember, some poor guy got shot out in Queens, I think, or in Brooklyn, for trying to interfere with some schmucks playing music on a subway just a few days ago. A guy killed them. And you know, when you see people in crowded subways start automatically getting violent, like escalating, you know, to out of control behavior, you know, one has to decide, okay, how are you going to react to this? You know, I'm not 23 anymore. You know, in the past, I would definitely stick my nose into shit like that from the get, or try to cool it out. Or what happened to that guy in the subway pulling into that Marine who strangled that guy? All right. I mean, there's all this crazy shit that happens in New York. And unfortunately, you have to go out at times and, you know, sort of have street alertness in your brain 100%. And I certainly have it up here in the Bronx. So, you know, these kind of things with people, you know, and then of course you'll get some, frankly, pussy ass excuses for some psychotic maniac who is serially knifing people. I mean, fuck that guy. You know, fuck him. You know, I don't give a fuck who he is. And I remember going into a place where I was, you know, had to deal with people. It was a government office, and the hammer man was a guy. I remember this guy running around taking a hammer to black women, right? A cop in Union Square shot and killed the guy. And all those black women in that place all were happy as shit that this stupid son of a bitch had gotten killed. So I'm not even going into the direction of wokeness, political correctness. I don't use that kind of terminology. All right. A psychotic motherfucker is a psychotic motherfucker. And I don't give a fuck who he is, what color he is. He can go fuck himself. He's a dangerous motherfucker. And someone running around stabbing people randomly, I'm glad I watched that. Because I'll check out somebody with a fatigue and a black hoodie. I'll sort of watch and check out somebody like that, but that's New York, man. What can I say?
Okay. Well, Mike, we'll go to Ken after it, but Mike, you got it. Are you gonna be riding the subway to come to the diner tomorrow after this, or are you gonna stay home?
Same as you. It can happen on the buses also. It can happen on the street, as they were saying. Now, I want to echo what Jim said. I said, I think it's important to understand the forces and everything like that of why people did it. But first, you got to take them out. You do the understanding and the assessment afterwards, but you have to stop the person from doing this, okay? That's it. Somebody's going around stabbing people on the subway. Somebody's coming at me with a knife. I'm not going to sit around there trying to evaluate what caused him to do this. I'm just going to say, holy shit. That guy's going on the tracks. I'm going to have to beat the shit out of him. I'm going to have to do whatever I have to do and whatever I can. So, yeah, I agree with Jim. This guy's going around stabbing people on the subway. He's got to be taken out. So that's it. Maybe he's doing it for attention. Maybe he's doing it because he's sick. Maybe whatever reason he's doing it. First, eliminate the problem. In other words, eliminate the life-threatening problem that's going on here, and then you can sit around and try to analyze. Well, but yeah, there's a lot of.
Are you glad
New York, you have to have street sense? Yeah.
Seeing all this, or I guess you probably have occasional crazy guys in LA too, right? You got to mute. Ken, you got to mute
occasionally.
But any piece you wanted to do then? Because otherwise, I think we can call it for the night. I'm a little tired too.
Ken?
Nah, I got something, but it's too confrontational. No, it's okay.
Watch asshole Trump.
That's
Alex.
right. There you go.
Asshole.
Exactly what Jim said. That asshole Trump.
By the way, one point I heard today, he came within a second of being bound and gagged in the courtroom. What was that yesterday? I'm not quite sure. I don't think they would be bound and gagged. He would have just had a contempt charge. But he's arguing. The judge tells him to do something, and he's arguing. The judge will say, "You're out of order," and he says, "No, you're out of order, and you're out of order." Doesn't he realize? Is he that far gone that he doesn't realize he's in a
No. He's doing that quite deliberately. It's funny. I put in a Google search for Donald Trump using the criminal law cases for political purposes, which is clearly what he's been doing since March of last year. Because, they thought that the Democrats probably thought that all those cases were going to overwhelm him and force him out of the race. Well, guess what? It's actually been probably the major source, or one of the major sources of him raising money and being boosted in his base's eyes as the savior. And it was funny today. I was talking to Otis, and we were talking about FCC rules about you can't take action. You can't call for action if you're doing a show that's monitored in a nonprofit by the FCC. And I said, you know what? I'd love to have some guy who defends Trump, because I'd like to ask him straight to his face. Can you explain to me how you believe that Trump is chosen by God? That he's sent by God to represent everybody? That he's the savior? Can you explain that to me? It just, I want that to happen. I want to have that kind of dialogue with somebody who really, I want to have a serious discussion with somebody who believes that Donald Trump is sent by God to save the planet or save, America or whatever. So, it's, and he was deliberately
I
doing
think
that.
it's that you
Out
have
front.
better luck finding somebody who said he was sent by the devil.
Oh, well, yeah, right. But, but out there, but his base, of course, loves him. I mean, I want to have discussions with guys like that. And so he was doing all that stuff with Eugene Carroll today. And, it was amazing. She's sitting there talking about how her life is ruined. She sleeps with a shotgun in her father's shotgun up there in her house in, wherever the hell she lives in Rockland County or somewhere like that. And she gets death threats every day. I mean, fuck Donald Trump. Fuck him and all these guys who back him. It's a disgrace to America to have to deal with this kind of piece of shit stuff. Unbelievable.
But you know something, Jim, you bring up a good point because, Trump, is really a useful idiot. I mean, yeah, he's manipulating these things. He's talking in court. Of course, if they actually put him in jail for a couple of days to cool off, I don't know how much he's going to like that. But yeah, he's doing it for political purposes. It has nothing to do with what's going on in the courtroom. But the fact is, the people who are buying this, that's the problem. I mean, Trump is just Trump. All these people who are buying into that, for whatever reason it is.
Michael, there's a great quote in People magazine in 1998 where Trump said, "If I run, I'm going to run as Republican because they're the stupidest voters." And that, he right away.
He got him right.
And he's right. I can tell them any kind of bullshit and they'll believe it. And he's right. He's totally right.
Well, that was 15 years ago. Yeah.
No, we keep we have people who come to the diner who still with Trump despite everything.
Okay, let's not get personal, Alex.
What? Name in Brooklyn is still with Trump?
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, we have fun. We have fun bringing up the stupid shit Trump does, and he still defends him. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, anyway, what can I tell you? That's a good reason that
and
somebody
he talks about helping out LBJ in '64.
Well,
so shows you politics is funny. Yeah.
It certainly is.
It shows you the importance of having regular sex for the past 50 years. And what can I tell you?
It may come down to that.
Yeah.
It may come down to that. Who was it? I forgot who it was they said this about. But the guy was, doing a Trump ranting and raving, and they said, "What do you want from the guy? He hasn't gotten laid in 20 years." Maybe that's it. He needs to jerk off more. I don't know. But I'll tell you one thing. It is the fact that so many people in this country supported him. I remember in 2016 when, people said, well, he still lost the popular vote. I said, yeah, but look at how many people voted for him. And then in in other words, 4 years later, they voted for him again after he showed what he was. That's the concerning thing. It's the people out there voting for him. Not this one, wimpy little, spoiled rich brat. It's the people who buy into this. And I guess that, what Jim just quoted from 1998 is basically tells the tale.
Right.
But we'll see.
Kenny,
I have a question which will not be offensive, okay?
Yeah.
Excluding all the Republicans and anybody who voted for Trump. Now let's look at the rest of the country. What percentage of that population believes Christ is going to come back and the dead will rise again?
About 40%, 15%.
How many? 40%?
I'd say 14 to 15% for sure. The evangelicals about 14% of the American population. And then remember, America is frankly the most religious of any first world country. So there's a lot of Americans who are very religious. Now, would I say that more than 14? I mean, how many Americans who are religious would actually believe that Trump it represents God.
No. Forget about that. Forget about everybody who supports Trump.
Yeah.
The other people who are brilliant enough to know that he's a criminal and he's sent by the devil. Forget the guys who support Trump. So you're saying 15% of the good guys believe Christ is coming back.
14% of Americans are evangelical Christians.
Uh-huh.
And so you figure those guys have like the evangelicals feel that the second coming is upcoming.
Okay, so that's one thing. What percentage of that population, now I'm talking about all the smart people who know that Trump is evil, what percentage of them pray for their own benefit? They ask God to intervene in their lives. Could you please do something to save me from getting fired? How many pray?
I know people who are religious who feel the way that you just described. I mean, there's probably them, but I know
60% are still church going, right, or something.
Yeah, well, a lot of Americans are all over the place in terms of religions. I mean, how many African Americans are church going, and do they think that Trump is corrupt? Fuck no.
And what percentage of that population, again, they would never go to Trump, stupid enough to join the army, go get killed?
Well, increasingly small.
Make a jump like that. I mean, we're from that to that. I mean,
Yeah, Ken, that might be that's a whole different thing. Yeah.
But and the whole military is having a big recruitment. I mean, that's why they were talking about the aircraft carrier, the Ford, that they had to bring back because they didn't have a big enough crew. Because that's a result of, again, the problems with not just recruitment but retaining sailors and soldiers over time. They have but it's not just the U.S. I mean, there's been a whole series of like screw ups with the British military. They can't. They were talking about deploying one of their Queen Elizabeth aircraft carriers to Yemen, but they can't do it because they don't have enough sailors to crew the replenishment vessel that would have to go with it. Because again,
and if we go up to the top, you said that Obama was the one who put a sanction on Chavez. Was it Obama?
Yeah, he started that. Yeah,
right. And then Clinton bombed Bosnia. And Obama and deported more people than anybody in the last 500 years, whatever he did. So, you talk about, and there's all kinds of corruption that happens on all sides of America. Nancy Pelosi making money on the stock market. And, and that black woman who's having an affair with the prosecutor and paid him near $1 million to prosecute Trump. Says, he's good. He knows what he's doing. I mean, this is the guy. I got the right guy. Just straight out larceny. So, I think the qualification of saying anybody who supports Trump or is a Republican is extremely, I think it qualifies as being bigoted. Which it's not racist, it's bigoted. Bigoted. It's saying anybody who wears glasses is an asshole. It's about the same level of intelligence.
I plead I'm bigoted about stuff like that. I admit that. Hell, I'm proud I'm bigoted about stuff like that.
Right.
But I certainly have dealt with more people who support Governor Wallace than anybody in fucking Pacifica ever did.
Right.
I certainly have worked with people who feel the same way that Trump has, more than a lot of people in Pacifica have. So I've listened to these kind of arguments in my personal life for years. And sure, if I'm dealing with people who I like, who feel that way, yeah, I'm going to talk about football or something like that. I'm going to change the subject. I don't want to argue. Let's talk about baseball. Let's not talk about politics. Let's talk about the Yankees or the Mets or something like that. I shift the subject really quickly. But, I mean, we're in a situation where some guy who thinks that he's going to, he's outright saying shit that, he thinks is cutesy wootsy for his base and shit straight out of Adolf Hitler. Give me a break. I mean, that kind of shit you gotta fucking oppose. I mean, Jesus Christ, to call people vermin, to say the bloodlines are being polluted. I mean, what kind of bullshit is that? That's fucked up. You know, I mean, that's completely fucked up.
And also, I have to chime in here because, again, we were discussing degrees. That's why murder gets a bigger sentence than unarmed robbery or something. You got to say to yourself, hey, one thing is worse than another. So you could say, oh, this politician, well, they were corrupt. They did this one corrupt thing. That's not the same thing as calling for an insurrection. If he, depending upon what the court says. But I'm just saying that, there are degrees. Some things are worse than others. Not, you can't equate everything. And life is tough. You got to make these decisions. I mean, people can say, oh yeah, Trump's done all this shit. But look, I remember when when I was doing the research.
Well, when you go, you got to put
wait,
something on the grounds here. Look at something practical. Go ahead, Michael.
Wait, hold it, Ken. This is an example. When Kurt Meyer, the commander of the 12th SS Division, was shown when he was finally arrested for war crimes, and he was still supporting Adolf Hitler. This is after the war was over. Still said Hitler was great. And they said, well, let me show you what Hitler did. And they showed him pictures of the concentration camps, photos and films of the concentration camps. And his answer was, well, if you think that's bad, some of my men, when they were captured, they had their watches stolen. You can't equate things. You can't equate everything. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay. What do you consider the Biden administration's handling of the southern border excusable or good, better than excusable? It's admirable. The way that they left Afghanistan, it's a good job. They did a good job.
Well, remember who? First of all,
wait a second. Let's not stop there. Okay. Do you think that the current laws that are coming down from the administration without going through the legislation are appropriate about changing the gig economy, things like that? Do you think it's all the Biden administration is doing a good job, doing a good job? Not intervening. Why the fuck didn't they intervene and get Ukraine to back down and come to a settlement? No, I mean, I think this is correct. We've never taken a close look at it. There were peace negotiations or compromises going on between the Ukraine and Russia before the invasion, and the U.S. said, bullshit, don't take shit from Russia. And don't worry, we'll give you all the weapons to fight. You think that was good? Is that good for the world?
All right. Well, first of all, that didn't happen. The idea that they were going to give weapons to their heart, they thought they were going to be overthrown when the Russians invaded. So yeah, they were helping them get equipped between 2014, 2015.
No, you're going up to when the invasion happened. I'm saying before the invasion.
Yeah, and then what do people want? Machine guns on the bar? I guess some people basically want people just to shoot motherfuckers down trying to cross the border. Just shoot them fucking down. I mean, let's get to the gist of it.
What do you want? You want to? Hey, how much room you got? Can you put another bed in your house? I know that New York is running out of places to keep the refugees. I mean, Eric Adams complains about it every day. You got a room you can put a cot in the kitchen or something to take some people in?
You know what I actually did last week? I went down to the local church that gives out clothes to the migrants. I said, you know what? I'm going to bring some shit down for you guys. And I'm going to do that. But like what? I live in I live in a small apartment. I live in a house. I mean, shit, you have a house. I mean, I was going to say yesterday, let's have your house as a HQ for some of the migrants when you were complaining about this yesterday. I mean, look, there's no easy solution to this policy. And then the question is where people like that get absorbed in the economy. Now, yeah, maybe 100,000 people coming in 1 month. That's a lot of fucking people.
No, 3 million in the last year.
We have
not 100,000 a month. 3 million.
We've got 20 million undocumented people in the United States right now.
20 million?
Yeah, about 20. That's what they say.
Undocumented,
a lot more. Undocumented. Now there could be a lot more, but like, are these people like they're doing all these shit jobs? Like some of our relatives probably did when they first came to the United States. I mean, see, what gets me is that where's the I mean, I guess it never existed really, because look at all these immigration laws, the way they reacted to Jews coming, to Italians coming, to anybody from Eastern Europe. They regarded them as like they were like vermin in the late 19th century to some people in America. Irish were considered apes in the antebellum period. I mean, like, where do you draw the line on this stuff? I mean,
where are you
like,
coming up? Where are you coming up? What part of the Constitution says you have to be magnanimous, and love everybody and not judge anyone? You don't have the right to discriminate.
We were letting people come in from Europe. I mean, when did this immigration stuff start? I mean, in terms of controlling the population coming in, that's an interesting question. Slaves came in involuntarily. Irish came in. They were treated like fucking shit when they came in.
Chinese were banned.
Chinese were banned. We nearly went to war Japan before World War One. And after World War One, they were very angry about the immigration laws that were mounted against Japanese. And then, the question of Jews coming in, 3 million. How many Jews came in from Europe? 1.5 million, I think, in the late 19th and early 20th century. And they certainly weren't treated well when they came in. I mean, they came in, they're hardworking people. They absorbed themselves. And, Israel Zangwill writes his melting pot play, in 1909 or something like that. So look, again, it's been a mixed bag about how, what is an American? Who are Americans? How do people identify as Americans? But again, people get absorbed. I mean, like how many people, I remember meeting a friend of mine who was on an aircraft carrier he enlisted in the Navy. He came from Jamaica. He then eventually went to law school. He came from a working class West Indian family, hardworking family. They valued education highly. All his sisters went to college. He went to college. He went to law school. I mean, so, how many, again, like, Americans are always reinventing themselves. We are a society that reinvents ourselves. People have, quote, fresh starts. I mean, it's not all mythology. There is a reality to that. People do go out and change things for themselves.
Okay, it's a wonderful country, and I totally agree with you. And you just have to have a little more respect for the people who disagree with you about who should be running the country and what policies should be used, as opposed to saying, oh, this guy eats shit, and his father eats shit, and his mother was a whore, and he's an idiot. And in fact, anybody who listens to him is stupid. What about the fucking Muslims that have taken over Michigan? You think that's the same group of people?
Well,
so you have to have tolerance. If you're going to have immigration, you got to have tolerance, and you can't just go around and saying, "Oh no, this is a threshold." If you don't say Trump scumbag, you're just not you're just an idiot. I don't care how many degrees you have. I don't care what you've done to help the country. I don't give a shit how many people have relied on you or what you've done to benefit anything. That's all irrelevant, because I don't like what that guy says. He's smart with the public. He knows that if he says, oh, this girl is so stupid, or, he makes outrageous remarks, then he gets coverage. And he's had coverage for the last, he's in office for 4 years, another 4 years, but last 12 years, he's been on the fucking TV every goddamn night. Trump.
He's had coverage in the mid-70s when he started to, enter Manhattan real estate. So, like, he's like a known entity to anyone here. I mean, you've been out in California. When did you move out to California? Weren't you here when he was, like, rising up in New York?
You moved out I don't know, whatever.
70s, right?
You had a TV show. I don't know. That's not the point. It isn't the point of the personality. It's the point of the policies.
I worked in a company. We used to have to deal with the Trump organization.
Yeah, you're going again with the personality.
He was a client. You're
falling into the trap of Greek tragedy. It's the kings and the queens. That's all that matters. It's Putin and Trump and Jimmy Carter and names that we know. That's what's running the world. These 5 or 6 dramatic influencers. The people that matter are the soldiers who are fighting, or the people that go to work, the everyday guy, the people that runs the grocery store, not the goddamn guy who's on TV, or Brad Pitt, or oh, I can't think of names. Anybody. All these principles are used all the time. I've seen the press do that over and over again. I remember in the Iraq War, a guy flubbed. He said, he was from the Pentagon. And he says, well, Saddam did this thing today. He was about to say the forces in Iraq did this, but he said, no, Saddam Hussein did this. And it's Saddam against George Bush. That's it. It's a drama. It's on TV. This is the same shit. You're not handling the issues. You're just going by Trump is evil. Look what he said. Look what he did.